Hello and welcome to the basics on the Agenoria, an in-depth look at aspects of the early steam railways. One of the oldest locomotives on display at the National Railway Museum in York is the Agenoria, dwarfed by the 1930s streamliner standing alongside. The Agenoria was built in the same year as the Rainhill Trials and Rocket, and gives a glimpse of the locomotive technology which Rocket so triumphantly superseded. The Agenoria was built by Foster, Rastrick and Company of Stourbridge in the English Midlands, and just for clarification, the locomotive's name is the Agenoria, with the definitive article being included on her nameplates. Agenoria is a Greek word which means courage. John Urpeth Rastrick's major claim to fame in railway history is having, together with the London civil engineer James Walker, conducted a survey of all the then locomotive-worked railways in Britain on behalf of the Liverpool and Manchester Railway in 1828 to 1829, and serving as a judge at the Rainhill Trials. Rastrick was a leading civil and mechanical engineer during the early 19th century. The Rastrick family was originally from Yorkshire, and he was the son of another John to whom he had been apprenticed. At the age of 15, he went to work at the Ketley Ironworks in Shropshire, and around 1808 he formed his first business partnership with John Hazeldine and two of the latter's brothers at the Bridgenorth Foundry in Shropshire. Hazeldine and Rastrick were granted the right to produce Trevithick's patent high-pressure steam engines, and they also built Trevithick's famous Catch Me Who Can, which ran on a circular track in London during autumn 1808. Rastrick formed a new partnership with James Foster in 1819 at Stourbridge in Worcestershire. Foster, Rastrick and Company built mill machinery and steam engines, and around 1827 or 1828 started work on a locomotive for Lord Dudley's Shut End Colliery Railway. The 3 3/4 mile long railway opened in June 1829, the local press reported. The locomotive, named the Agenoria, was then attached to 8 carriages carrying 360 passengers, the weight being 41 tons 18 hundredweight, and the whole proceeded attended by a band of music at the rate of 7 1/2 miles per hour. On the return of the engine and passengers, carriages laden with coal to the number of 12 were attached to the engine, which, with the 8 carriages of passengers, the total weight being adumbrated at 131 tons. The engine started with this load at a rate of nearly 3 1/2 miles per hour. The number of persons present to witness the first exhibition of a locomotive engine in this part of the country was immense. Whilst the Agenoria had been under construction, Horatio Allen, an American engineer, visited Foster and Rastrick's work and ordered 3 similar locomotives for the Delaware and Hudson Canal Company in Pennsylvania in the United States. A 4th locomotive for that railroad came from the works of Robert Stephenson and Company of Newcastle, aptly named the Pride of Newcastle. The Agenoria had a very long working life, and she was at work at the Shut End Colliery Railway until the middle of the 1860s. By 1880, however, she was noted as being broken down and partially covered with grass and rubbish. Her grasshopper motion had been taken off and was scattered about, and one of the cylinders had been removed to work as a mine pumping engine. Having piqued the interest of the Patent Office Museum, the forerunner of the modern Science Museum in London, the Agenoria was restored at Shut End Ironworks and went on display at Wolverhampton in June 1884, before being put on display in London in December 1884. Her present appearance, therefore, owes much to this Victorian restoration. Despite this, however, much of the locomotive remains as built in 1829. The boiler barrel, flue tubes, valve gear, cylinders and grasshopper motion are certainly original. In order to increase the heating surface, the wrought iron boiler flue is bifurcated. so that it branches into two parallel tubes which then unite again beneath the chimney. The slightly dished back plate of the boiler is made from a single piece of wrought iron, and together with the flue is bolted to a large external flange, and this means that the whole assembly can be easily removed for maintenance. Originally the boiler sported two safety valves, but the safety valve at the rear of the boiler has been replaced by a steam dome, which is topped by a safety valve. The safety valve at the front of the boiler has been replaced by an inspection cover. The chimney is the longest ever made for a railway locomotive and rises a staggering 22 feet above rail level. The Agenoria was originally mounted on a wrought iron bar frame, and the present wood and iron sandwich frame is a later replacement. The original wheels were wooden with iron hubs, and the present ones are cast iron, and they have early balance weights. These balance weights are probably original to the locomotive from 1829, and it is likely the Stourbridge Lion, built for the United States, also had balance weights on its wheels. Another innovation is the use of an early form of mechanical lubricator, driven using gearing from the axles. The Agenoria and her sisters also used early forms of gauge glasses using a thick water tube to measure the boiler water level, rather than the earlier and unreliable tri-cocks. The cylinders either side of the boiler and the grasshopper motion are reminiscent of Puffing Billy. Unlike Puffing Billy, whose valves are worked by tappets reminiscent of stationary engine practice, the Agenoria's valves are worked by an eccentric on the rear axle. The very long-stroke cylinders are also like those of Puffing Billy, and both recall those used by Trevithick. The exhaust steam passes through lengthy exhaust pipes underneath the boiler, before rising to enter the chimney at the front end, and on their way these exhaust pipes heat water before it is injected into the boiler using two feed pumps. Of her American sisters, Stourbridge Lion was the first steam locomotive to run in the continental United States. But there was a problem. Horatio Allen had been informed that Stourbridge Lion and her two sisters weighed 5.5 tons, and he had engineered the wooden track topped with a strip of iron on that basis. Something must have got lost in translation, as Stourbridge Lion weighed in at 8 tons. First steamed on the 8th of August 1829 and driven by an enthusiastic Allen before a large crowd in downtown Honesdale, she made several successful trips but damaged the under-engineered track so badly that she was eventually laid up. The cost of upgrading the track to support the weight of locomotives was too great for the fledgling company, so the 4 locomotives it owned were replaced by horses. Offered for sale in 1834, Stourbridge Lion was dismantled sometime around 1845, and the boiler was used in a local foundry. Then, in 1883, exactly at the same time as a museum was showing interest in the remains of the Agenoria in Britain, the Delaware and Hudson Railroad borrowed the original boiler to put it on show in an exhibition in Chicago. It was later donated to the National Museum in Washington, D.C. in 1888, and it was joined by other parts of the engine which were collected, including both rocking beams and one cylinder. The remains of Stourbridge Lion are now on display at the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Museum. A working replica of the Stourbridge Lion was built in 1933, and it now forms a centerpiece of Wayne County Museum at Honesdale, a stone's throw away from where the original Lion was put through her paces. So those are the basics on the Agenoria and her American sister, Stourbridge Lion. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below, and perhaps you'd like to give the Agenoria a visit at the National Railway Museum in York and appreciate for yourself her immense giraffe-like chimney. To find out more about John Rastrick and his locomotives, perhaps you'd like to check out my book, Before Rocket, available from Gresley Books.